Perfect guitar tone, or how to achieve the perfect guitar amp tone. Hi, my name is Steve Gray. This is Gray's Guitars. Thank you for watching. We're going to go ahead and take a look at this recent article by Guitar Bomb and see what they say, and then I'm going to put in my 2 cents as well and go from there. So, how to achieve the perfect guitar amp tone, balancing volume, EQ, and gain for optimal sound and great recording. How to achieve the perfect guitar amp tone. Achieving the perfect amplifier tone can often feel like a complex puzzle, especially when judging different volume levels. Whether you're rocking out in a 5-watt combo or a 50-watt half stack, mastering the art of volume control is essential for your practice space or recording studio. Let's explore how to get the ideal sound without falling into common traps. How to achieve the perfect guitar amp tone. Understanding the volume dilemma. Many guitarists fall into the trap of cranking up their amps to the maximum, believing louder means better. It's a common misconception that the real sound of an amp is achieved in extreme volume. Surprisingly, many classic albums were recorded with amps mic'd at relatively low volumes in sound isolated rooms. On the flip side, playing too quietly, particularly in a noise-sensitive environment, can also be problematic. It's vital to consider the practicality of your amp's volume in your specific setting. The magic of EQ pedals. Forget about boutique overdrives or chasing after the exclusive real clon. Your solution might be just be an EQ pedal. This tool is invaluable in a band setting, allowing you to sculpt those essential mids to cut through the mix of highs and lows. Personally, I do not own an EQ pedal. I've felt perfectly fine. I've never felt the need to buy an EQ pedal. I've heard good things about them. I don't really have anything against them. But that's just something that is not on my pedal board, in all honesty. It's not something that I use. Maybe I should buy one, perhaps, one day. See if I actually like the sound of it. But there's a couple of Behringer pedals that I'd like to buy, and neither one of them is an EQ pedal, so we'll see if that happens in the future. But I have heard very good things. Literally any EQ pedal. It can be an expensive one, it can be a cheap one, it does not matter. Brand doesn't really matter, just something to give you a little bit different sound in the mids. So, mids. Even if you prefer a scooped mid sound, adding a bit of those mids back can enhance your signal. An EQ pedal is particularly useful for adjusting your amp's EQ curve to achieve that sweet spot at a more practical volume. The MRX10 band equalizer, MXR 6-band equalizer, the Boss GE7, and the Joyo R12. They give you a couple of different ones. Behringer, I think, has one of those as well. The gain misconception. Common myth in the guitar world is that a high gain amp tones on famous records are achieved with extreme gain setting. In reality, it's often about the right balance of volume and distortion. Those iconic Marshall or Vox amp tones might not have their gain knobs turned up as high as you think. A powerful, clean tone at high volume and mixed correctly can sound massive. Think AC/DC. Their chords aren't heavily distorted. They're just played loud. So consider rolling off some gain, dialing down the pedals, and focused on a better picking attack and preamp volume for greater clarity. Giving you a couple of options there. A Marshall JCM 800 reissue and a Vox AC30. I mean, literally, so in terms of AC/DC, they just use a Marshall and then they use the SG. Like, it's literally Angus Young right there. That's his gear. It's an amp and a guitar. I'm not sure what speakers he's using, but I think it's the is it the JCM 800 or maybe it's a Plexi? I think it's a Plexi. I'm going to be honest with you. We can look that up. But yeah, literally he's just using an amp and a guitar. So we can do Angus Young. Yeah, so if you ever wanted to know your favorite artist gear, while this isn't always 100% accurate, especially for lesser known artists, unfortunately. If they're a very popular artist, 9 out of 10, it's going to tell you what guitars, amps, effects, pedals, mics, and everything else. Yeah, so I believe these are called Plexis, Marshall 1970, 2023. At least I think that's what they're referred to. But yeah, I mean, looks like he's using a greenback. Looks like it even tells you the power tubes I guess he does use a couple of effects pedals. Noise hush gate, a power supply. First tour he ever used them, so he hasn't been using these guys for a while. Strobe tuner. Yeah, strobe tuners are always solid too. But what I recommend is, sure, you can have an EQ pedal, but first and foremost, figure out where you want things. So I know people like Phil McKnight will be like, oh, you don't need to go to 5. Everybody thinks, oh, just go to 5. And I'm one of those people. I think go to 5 and then add or lessen, depending on what is going on. Ultimately, I can tell you the settings I have right now. It also depends on the guitar, because pickups are going to have different ratings, different ohm ratings, and if it's really, really high, you might want to turn everything down because you're trying to get a clean tone out of it. Or if it's more like your standard PAF, which is typically around the 8 ohm range, then you can dial everything in. In terms of what I currently have on one of my amps, this is a PV6505 Plus. I might sound quiet because I'm turning away from my microphone. The low is on about a 3, the mid is on about a 6, and the high is a 3.5. Because it is a big, hefty half stack and I'm playing at bedroom levels, the volume is on like a half. Like, legitimately. Like, I go to 1 sometimes, but even then it seems to be a little bit too loud. And then the clean channel, this is all the clean channel, by the way. The pre-gain, where I guess that would be just considered the gain to a certain extent, that is at about a 2.5, maybe a 3. No, actually right now it's on a 4. I was looking at the wrong thing. In terms of the gain channel, I have everything at like 5.5. Just 5.5 even. It also has a reticence and presence knob. The clean channel, they're both stacked at 5. And then the lead channel, they are both on about a 6 or so. Yeah, I would say about a 6. But then I go to my Carvin MTS 3200, and everything's actually lower because I was also playing a different guitar through that recently. Treble's at like a 3, everything's kind of at a 3. The treble is at a 3, which I think treble is like the equivalent to your bass, or maybe not. No, treble would be considered highs. Different amps will name things differently, so that can also get a little bit confusing. The mid's right at 5, the bass is at like a 4. They call it scooping the mids. You can ultimately do whatever you want. Depends on what I'm going for. I find usually I'm actually surprised at the settings I currently have my 6505 on, because usually I have the mids down lower because I just think it sounds better with less mids on a clean tone. At least that's my personal preference. And then the gain channel looks like everything is at about a 5. The highs might be up a little bit higher, maybe a 6 roughly. The drive is also, which is that equivalent to a gain, is a 6. I haven't really messed around. If you saw my short yesterday, it was like a 3-minute video. I don't know if a longer short, if you will. I've got an Ashdown Peacemaker 50, right? Ashdown Peacemaker 50. That is a hand-wired tube British amp. That's really pretty cool. I'm not getting as much feedback. I have a cell phone tower behind my house, unfortunately, so as I've told in the past, I do get interference pretty much every time I play. You hear it. Significantly less interference with that amp. That one I've been messing with. That has a high and a low for the gain. It doesn't have an actual gain channel. It has dual inputs. I think the one input's like a high and one's a low. That's also going to be dependent on how you do things, because if you have a single channel amp and you don't have, you want cleans, you got to tone down the gain super, super low, like a 1 or a 2, but then if you want more distorted sounds, then you're going to be knocking the gain up significantly higher. So that's something to factor in as well. It depends on what settings you are. Are you playing a live gig? If you're at a live gig, maybe the volume's a little bit louder. If you're in your bedroom and you have a half stack like me for no reason, or I guess a head and a 2x12 also, depending on what I feel like connecting it to. Quarter stack, that's what I'll call it. Then, you know, I'm not going to be playing at high volumes, it's going to be lower. If you have like a very small amp, small little amp, maybe it's a 5 watt, like I have a very small, I think it's a 5 watt, the Roland Microcube. Something like that, I'm going to have the volume significantly higher than I would on the half stack, because there's a lot less wattage, there's a lot less power. There's also a bunch of cool effects built into that, so I do like doing that once in a while. If you are using just a modular in terms of doing it too, I still recommend pretty much start at either maybe 3 or 5. Whatever, you know, ultimately pick one number for pretty much everything across the board, and then slowly start alternating where you want your settings. What you can also do is typically online say, hey, you know, I really like Slash. I want to know his exact settings. You can look it up. We can just look up Slash amp settings and see what they are. And here we go. So this involves setting the bass around 4 or 5, mids around 7 to 8, and treble, which is going to be your highs, around 5 to 6. So he scoops the mids himself. So you can, as I said, you can literally just look up the settings and you can get a general idea what your favorite artist does if that's something you're trying to replicate. With modulars, I don't personally have one. I guess technically I have one. I have a Line 6 Pod GX, very old modular that I never used for anything. That is something where you can mess with all the settings too. And, you know, don't be afraid to turn the knobs. The only knob that you should be afraid to turn a little bit is maybe the volume knob. So I would recommend, you know, rolling off the volume on your guitar and then putting the volume where you want on the amp, because sometimes you don't even need to mess with anything. If you crank up the volume on your guitar, you can start getting that gain sound as well. And you just roll off the volume and then it kind of sounds clean again. So that is an option too, is, you know, set the volume where you kind of think you want it. You know, maybe start, same with your guitars, you know, maybe start everything at a 5 and then see if you need more or less volume depending on what you want in the situation that you're in. But, you know, when I first bought a tube head, I thought I messed up really bad. The PV actually was the first tube head I bought. I am old school in that way where I like using physical amps and just plug into the amp, turn it on, good to go. I don't want to plug into my computer, or I guess I could plug a modular into a cabinet. I guess that is an option too. But I sounded terrible. It sounded great at the store and sounded extremely terrible at my home because, you know, I didn't really understand what I was doing with the settings per se. You know, I did have a Marshall AVT that just had the preamp tubes before that. I never had an issue with, and I think I also had a Marshall MG full stack at one point, completely unnecessary in terms of volume. But it's all about the settings. So I'm going to say maybe learn from what I did, or as I said, you can try doing it Phil McKnight style. Put everything around 5 and then lower or higher a little bit at a time until you figure out what you want. You know, I don't really go as low as 1 to 2 on anything. I don't think a lot of artists ever go as low as 1 to 2. I feel like 3 is kind of the lowest a lot of people go. But do with that information as you will. It's not to say you can't put your high, lows, and bass on 1 to 2. But in terms of sound, I don't particularly like that sound. So made this longer than it needed to be. That's kind of my 2 cents. At some point, you will get a full video of the Ashdown amp, because I think a couple people would like to see that anyway. Till next time, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, leave a like, share, comment, all that good stuff. And as always, have a good one.